welcome. I'm Ellie Richardson and you are watching The World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top headlines of this hour. The Pentagon is looking at sending up to 10,000 additional ground troops to the Middle East to give President Trump more military options, even as he weighs peace talks with Tehran, the Defense Department officials with knowledge of the planning said. Israel's military has said it's carried out strikes on targets in Tehran nearly a month into the Middle East war. It reported hitting missile launchers and storage sites in western Iran, as well as missile production sites in the capital. Iran's military has warned that hotels housing US soldiers across the region would be targeted in its war with the United States and Israel. It added that Iran's military has identified US forces using similar locations in Syria and Lebanon. Japan has expressed its regret over the break-in into the Chinese embassy in Tokyo by a knife-wielding Japanese military officer. The Japan side has still not said anything about the details of the incident. The UN Security Council will hold closed-door consultations today to discuss strikes on Iran at Moscow's request as the Middle East war goes into its first month. Few EU leaders will miss Hungary's Prime Minister Viktor Orban if he loses in his April 12th election after he blocked key policies including vital aid to Ukraine, but they don't expect his rival, if elected, to fully reverse Budapest's approach to Europe. The World Bank said it is prepared to provide immediate financial assistance to emerging market countries hit by the economic fallout of the Middle Eastern conflict, saying it was ready to respond at scale. Nepal's rapper turned politician Balendra Shah has been sworn in as Prime Minister after sweeping the first election since deadly anti-corruption protests topped the government last year. And we start this hour with some breaking news. Iranian media has reported that 3 container ships of various nationalities were turned back from the Strait of Hormuz after warnings from the Iranian Revolutionary Guards. The IRGC has stated that all shipping to and from ports of allies and supporters of Israel and America is prohibited through any corridor or to any destination. They have also added that the Strait of Hormuz is closed and that any transit through the waterway will face harsh measures. Iranian naval forces have maintained a blockade since late February, physically trapping 15 million barrels of crude oil per day and stalling all commercial tankers exiting the Persian Gulf. We are now being joined by Collins Chong-Yu-Keat, who's a foreign affairs and security strategy analyst, joining us from Kuala Lumpur. Thank you so much for joining us here today on NewsX World. So as obviously we just heard that Iran have blocked more containers and turned them back from the Strait's waterway. What is this signalling to the rest of the world now? As we know, Iran have let through some tankers, but obviously now we've just heard that they've now blocked more off as well.
Well, definitely it's trying to send a message that, although, he has no match for the, direct capacity and air power of the US, still he has this control, this geographical advantage, this leverage to impose costs in terms of energy, costs in terms of, shipping and transportation. And of course, this will have global implications. And of course, also we have seen how, as to date, there's still this wariness and reluctance of most of other global nations to join in the conflict, and of course also this is also being seen as one of the moves and maneuvers to increase the leverage and bargaining position of Iran, moving into this so-called 10 days negotiations with the US, and of course also we have seen the whole target is to ensure that there's this capacity and capability of Iran to disrupt this, and to have this profound and sustaining global costs. And of course, also this will increase further outreach, further concerns and risks, and to pile further pressure on the US from most of the other global powers. And that also is a showcase of Iran's own, still the leverage and asymmetric capacity with regards to in sustaining this conflict moving forward. And of course, also it remains to be seen how this will turn out in terms of Iran having this greater leverage in terms of these negotiations with the US, whether through intermediaries or whether through possible direct meeting in the days to come. Ellie.
And we heard that they have physically trapped 15 million barrels of oil per day. As we know, there is an oil crisis globally with prices hiking throughout the rest of the world. Do you think we will see a solution to this anytime soon? Obviously, we know the US are lifting sanctions so countries can bring in Russian oil, for example. It's a serious situation, this one. Do you think we're going to see a change in the Strait anytime soon, or is this now going to go on for longer than we thought?
I'm always optimistic about the prospects and outcome. We've seen how, on the side of Iran also, costs have been imposed, deterrence measures, warnings, as has been stated by, President Trump. And hopefully these couple of days of negotiations will turn out well. And of course, President Trump has given, his own, red line to ensure that, Iran has to toe the line. If not, there will be further repercussions involved, and the possibility of also having US boots on the ground on key areas, including on Kar Island. And of course, Kar Island is the major economic platform for Iran. And if that is dismantled, then again, we might see further escalations in terms of Iran having this pretext to retaliate further, not only on US bases, but also, of course, on other, Gulf allies. But I'm optimistic that because this will have profound implications on both sides, both on Iran and the US. And that, of course, also, and we have seen how, these current measures in terms of lifting some of the sanctions on Russian oil, as well as also the influx of also these oils from reserves, and have already we have seen this stabilization of oil prices. But I don't foresee oil prices to escalate beyond $150 per barrel. And as of now, we have yet to see also a major tit for tat or a major an all-out conflict with the participation from other Gulf nations, including also Saudi Arabia. So it is still very much in a controlled, calibrated response. And still, of course, also the notion of escalate to de-escalate and all that. But we have yet to see a major strike cycle. But that will change if there is no, needed response from Iran. And that will also compel Trump, who have no choice but to escalate further. And then we will see this possibility of this getting, riskier in terms of having this profound impact also on the sustaining rise of oil prices and sustaining inflationary pressure across the world.
Thank you, Collins. Please stay with us as we will be joining back shortly. UK Foreign Minister Yvette Cooper has called for a swift resolution to the ongoing Middle East conflict, warning that the situation is impacting global stability. Speaking ahead of a G7 meeting in France, Cooper said that the priority must be to restore regional peace as quickly as possible. She directly accused Iran of holding the global economy hostage by restricting shipping through the Strait of Hormuz. Cooper stressed that the strait is a critical international shipping route and freedom of navigation must be maintained. The remarks come as global concerns rise over energy supplies and trade disruptions. With Marco Rubio also attending the G7 talks, pressure is building on Iran to ease restrictions and reduce tensions in the region. Let's listen in.
We're deeply concerned about the links between Russia and Iran that have been long-standing in terms of shared capabilities, for example, drones provided to Russia by Iran that have been involved in the conflict by Ukraine, but we have also seen support from Russia provided to Iran in the Middle East conflict as well. And that is why I think as G7 countries we have a shared interest in coming together to discuss these issues and the way that we need to protect our global economy from countries that want to weaponise our economy against us.
We have some more breaking news now. The Kremlin has said that the United States is wrong to tie economic cooperation with Russia to settlement in Ukraine. Kremlin officials also warned that Russian and US companies are missing out on profits they could be making now. These statements come as the war in Ukraine continues with no ceasefire agreement in sight. Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps has issued a public warning urging civilians across the Middle East to leave areas where US forces are stationed, saying they could be harmed if conflict spreads. The statement, released nearly a month into the US-Israel war with Iran, called on residents to stay away from military bases and facilities hosting American troops and equipment. This comes as tensions remain high after recent strikes and counter-tries across the region and as US embassies and military commands issued their own safety and advisories. Government and military sources are watching developments with civilian evacuations and safety measures underway in some areas. We are now being rejoined again by Collins Chong-Yu-Keats. Thank you, Collins, for joining us back here for this. Now, is the IRGC's call for civilians to evacuate areas near US forces a genuine humanitarian warning or a calculated signal of imminent military escalation against American assets in the region?
Well, it can be both. We have seen how, of course, is also seen as a strategic signaling to the US that now is effectively calling out these US-linked zones or sites as imminent targets. And of course, also to frame future strikes on these areas as legitimate military action. And of course, also we have seen how this is also a showcase of Iran's still, very rightful capacity and capability to have these counter strikes and retaliation moves, and move from this deterrence phase to a more pre-authorized strike environment. Of course, also to increase the positioning, the bargaining leverage of Iran in terms of having this right and capacity to also continue these retaliations on the US sides. And of course, also this will have this age in terms of this narrative.
How might Gulf countries hosting US bases interpret this warning? Are they now de facto participants in the conflict, and could this trigger wider regional retaliation?
Well, we have seen, for the past 3 weeks now, the response, in direction of these nations have so far been restrained and strategically constrained and calibrated, depending also on the impact of those strikes by Iran. And most of the missiles or drones being fired by Iran have been intercepted. Of course, there have been some, damages and death tolls, but and they have not yet reached the level of how they will respond, to Iran in terms of proportion. So, and we are hopeful that things will remain that way in terms of, the risk of escalations being controlled. But this coming, threats to further the volume of attacks on these Gulf nations also. These Gulf nations have been well aware of what's to come.
Educational and cultural facilities across the country, impacting learning and community resources. The head of the Iranian Ministry of Education's Public Relations Center, Hossein Sadeghi, has highlighted the humanitarian and educational toll of the ongoing war. Iran's Deputy Health Minister Ali Jafarian has said that the total death toll in the country has now reached at least 1,937, underlining the scale of the crisis. Officials have called for urgent international attention to protect civilians and educational facilities, stressing the need for accountability. Iran has reported that US and Israeli strikes have damaged at least 120 museums and cultural sites across the country since the war began. Ahmad Alavi, head of Tehran City Council's Cultural Heritage Committee, said the attacks have caused serious structural damage to historical buildings and landmarks across multiple provinces. Among the damaged sites are UNESCO-listed Golistan Palace, the Marble Palace and Tay Motrash House, also known as the War Museum. Alavi stressed that these sites are not just architectural treasures, but symbols of Iran's rich cultural and historical heritage. Officials warn that continued strikes risk irreplaceable damage to centuries-old monuments and call for international attention to protect civilian and cultural assets. We are now joining back with Collins Chong-Yu-Keat. Thank you for joining us back here for this. Now, as we heard, they are attacking these monuments, these sites. What does this now take in this part of the conflict now, as we know it's rapidly progressing and also targeting these cultural sites for the countries as well?
Well, of course, this has been used to shape, wider global perception on the need also of course, to protect, these places and these sites. And of course, it has also shaped this global narrative in framing the US as being seen as the aggressor and in violating the rules-based order, in violating the sanctity of the international law and the right to protect, civilian areas and these important, cultural and, historical sites and places. And of course, also this has raised the cost and powerful the pressure on the US, whether whether it's intentional, whether it's by mistake. Still, the perception warfare and the psychological warfare and the new stakes that have been pushed forward, and in terms of also the pressure being put by other global powers on the US in terms of this high civilian casualty, in terms of also the damage to these historical monumental sites. And of course, all this has also reinforced the legitimacy of the regime in Iran in terms of getting, of course, greater domestic support and sentiments. And this parallel importance on the multiple warfares on the same theater in terms of narrative warfare. We have seen now that it's also gaining importance and now being equal in importance to military operations and operating side by side. And it remains to be seen how this will have any impact on any possible restraint by the US. But as of now, we have yet to see those kind of implications on the side of the US, based on the targeting of these historical sites for now.
Thank you so much, Collins Chong-Yu-Keat, for joining us here on NewsX World. Kuwaiti authorities have reported another attack on the country's infrastructure. Drones and cruise missiles targeted Mubarak al-Kabir port on Kuwait's Babayan Island. According to Kuwait's Ministry of Public Works, the port's infrastructure was attacked by what it called hostile drones and cruise missiles. Material damages were reported, but no casualties took place. According to Kuwaiti authorities, a separate attack targeting Kuwait's Shuaika port this morning, also causing material damages. We are now being joined by Matti Zweig, who's a geopolitical expert, joining us from Tel Aviv. Thank you so much, Matti. As we just heard, Kuwaiti authorities have reported another attack on the country's infrastructure. Drones and cruise missiles have targeted two of Kuwait's ports today, one this morning and one this afternoon. We are now being joined by Matti. Thank you, Matti, for joining us here for this. Hopefully you can hear me now. As we just heard, do these attacks on these ports, is Iran deliberately targeting these ports to choke global trade and energy supply chains, especially given the port's strategic location in the Gulf?
Well, the strategy of Iran is not new. I mean, we are almost 1 month inside this conflict and this war, and they are trying to make the maximum damage they can to every country in their surroundings. It means shooting indiscriminately 360 degrees all around. Okay, they saw that they can have a lot of harsh responses from the West. I mean, shooting to Turkey or to Cyprus or even to Azerbaijan. So they continue targeting and shooting and bombing all allies even, because it's not only enemy countries that they have American bases, like it can be Abu Dhabi, Dubai, or even Qatar in some way. They are targeting everybody, also Kuwait, also, and every time it's a different excuse. They are targeting civilians, but they say this is because this is a hotel, that there are also Americans, or a different facility, or a resort, or whatever. Not only American bases, not only American Navy, but everything. So this mentality and this destructive strategy, what they are trying to get is to put everyone on defense, to make everyone anger against Donald Trump, and try to demand that everybody will stop shooting and finishing this war. What they are not saying from day one is why they were cheating and lying all these years about the continuing of their nuclear developments, to make atomic bombs, to attack their neighbors, to try to wipe off Israel from the face of the earth. They just cheat and lie and continue cheating and lying. And the response is from everybody, first from the United States and Israel. And now there are big movements between the so-called not allies, but people that they were in peace with them in some way, even Saudi Arabia and others, Oman, and the countries in the Gulf. They are strengthening their cooperation now, even with Pakistan, and they are going to try to retaliate in some way or another if this war continues, despite all the so-called peace efforts.
Thank you, Matti. Please stay with us, as I will be joining back with you shortly. Iran's internet outage has now entered nearly 4 weeks, with monitoring group NetBlocks saying the country remains cut off from normal global connectivity as authorities maintain a near total blackout. The shutdown began on January the 8th as widespread protests spread nationwide and security forces sought to crush demonstrations, leading to telephone and internet services being severely disrupted or shut down across major cities. International access remains largely unavailable, with connectivity for most users stuck at a fraction of normal levels, even as some domestic services operate on limited whitelist. Business operations and online commerce continue to suffer, and there is no clear timeline for a full restoration internet services. NetBlocks data shows this is one of the longest blackouts on record. We are now being rejoined again by Matti. Thank you, Matti, for joining us back here for this. As we are now witnessing this fallout and this conflict, does a prolonged internet blackout make it easier to obscure civilian casualties and battlefield realities, effectively creating an information vacuum inside Iran?
Well, the regime of Iran is blocking everything from day one in January when they started to massacre their own people when there was no war. And I didn't see anyone in the world talking about this or against this. They were just obscuring, blocking all informations while they were committing a genocide against their own people. Just killing everybody in the streets. The orders were just kill everybody that is protesting. It doesn't matter if he's 12 years old or a pregnant woman or whatever, they just kill everybody. And now that all the oil prices are going up, suddenly people is very aware of this blocking and they say, oh, maybe they're obscuring something. No, they were obscuring all the time. I mean, this is a criminal regime that must finish their action in the world. And instead of helping a coalition to finish with them and helping the Iranian people to get their freedom, people is very, in many countries in the world, especially in the hypocritical Europe, they are saying that we don't know what's going on, everything is obscure. I mean, this is very simple. We are talking about more than 500 hours completely without internet, but I think their crimes are much more than that.
Thank you, Matti. Again, please stay with us as I'll be joining back with you shortly. US President Donald Trump has postponed the offensive against Iran till April the 6th, giving primacy to diplomacy and dialogue, as US has assembled a huge armada to tackle the next phase with 3 aircraft carriers and a huge amphibious assault ship awaiting for military orders from Central Command. According to reports, aircraft carrier Gerald Ford with supporting strike groups is in the Mediterranean. Aircraft carrier USS George Bush is off the coast of Gibraltar. Aircraft carrier Abraham Lincoln is off the Gulf of Oman in the Arabian Sea. Amphibious assault ship USS Tripoli and USS New Orleans with nearly 4,000 Marines are in southern Indian Ocean region. The USS Alan Shepard, Ocean Titan and John L. Canley, all logistics, support and surveillance, are off the Malacca Straits, ready to be inducted into the battle. We are now being rejoined again by Matti. Thank you, Matti, for joining us back here again for this. As we just heard, major military build-up within the region. What message is this sending to Iran as well? And also, how will they then react to this?
I think, Trump's strategy, it has been quite clear from the beginning. He said, let's go to negotiations. Those are my points, the main points that we want to agree. And in the meanwhile, he was building up a big force coalition around Iran. And he wanted to be completely ready for what is going on now. Now, this is a kind of second phase that they are also building up more blockage, more blowings on the Islamic regime. And they are also waiting. They say he's waiting for the responses. Of course, Iranians, they say they are very proud of covering all their killings and everything and just telling to the world, we are defeating the big empire, we are defeating the big Satan and the little Satan. Everything is a lie because we know what's going on the ground. They are diminishing every day more and more, also from the IRGC, also from the Basij, also from the central government, all their powers in every province and especially in Tehran, every day more and more. So they are being defeated, but they are still a big country with a lot of weapons and a lot of people still loyal to the regime. So they are saying that they are defeating. In the meanwhile, there are kind of negotiations that they are going through messages, especially from Pakistan and Egypt, and maybe some other country. Anyway,
yes.
We know that they are building up their force to have a second phase that probably is going to include the invasion and conquering of 2 islands at least.
Thank you so much, Matti, for joining us here on NewsX World. Thank you. Ukraine and Saudi Arabia have signed a key air defense agreement amid regional security concerns. During Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's visit to Riyadh, the two countries agreed to cooperate on developing Saudi Arabia's air defense capabilities. An official reported that the point of agreement is for Ukraine to support Saudi Arabia in developing all the necessary components of air defense, which the kingdom currently lacks. Zelensky took to social media to confirm that Ukraine and Saudi Arabia had reached an important agreement on defense and security. He also met with Saudi Crown Prince to discuss strategic partnership and regional stability. That's all we have time for. Keep watching NewsX World for more news updates from around the world.
In the midst of death, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists.